Welcome to the Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, where we are producers talking to producers about the real-time issues affecting the farm. I am your host, Evan Schout. I'll be joined by my co-host, Kristjan Hebert, as well as many other producers and experts to talk day-to-day operations. We are broadcast over multiple social media platforms, so like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. Now sit back, grab your Yeti or your beer, because it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast. I'm your host, Evan Schout. I've got your co-host, Kristjan Hebert, where we're going to talk a little bit about agriculture, what's happening in real time, and what we see going forward. So I think we'll just start off the start. What's your intro? Why are we doing this, Hebes? I mean, we talked about it for 2 years. What's the plan?
Yeah, I think as we thought about lots of podcasts, we thought they were a lot of straight interviewee, pretty planned, pretty prepped, lots of preparation ahead of time where the answers kind of felt canned, and neither one of us liked it, right? To be honest. And so, you with your fitness podcasts and I got to be honest, listening to the two Kelsey brothers just randomly talk and pull Jason's wife on. And I'm not going to say I'm a Taylor Swift fan, but that's probably one of the reasons we logged in to watch it. We kind of realized that maybe that's what agriculture needed, is more just a conversation about what's going on right now or why we do some stuff and kind of just roll with it instead of having it be prepared.
Well, and I always thought, going on most of the podcasts we go on, I get the script, I get the pre-work, I get the professionalism. And don't get me wrong, those are great for selling what we're trying to sell and doing what we're doing, but I would much rather just shoot the shit, pardon my language, but that to me is the best podcast, where it's more real. So our PR group might not like it, but I'm a huge fan of this. So that's where I came from. I mean, it took us 18 months to get here because I procrastinated as hard as I could before doing it, but let's call it episode 1.
Let's be honest, you've been frustrated with me for a long time that my idea of a presentation is someone else builds it and gives it to me the day before to read on the plane on my way there. So I'm I'm not one for too much structure and too much preparation.
Yeah, so those listening, I've done no prep for this other than a little bit of an agenda, and Kristjan, I literally didn't give him anything because I want the realest answers I can get from him. So that's where we're going to take you today. So for those that don't know who you are, give me a little bit of background, the businesses, what Hebert Grain Venture stands for, I guess.
Yeah, so I farmed just like everybody else. Came home in 2004 from U of S with an accounting and finance degree. Farm wasn't kind of big enough for all of us. To be honest, I wasn't even sure I wanted to farm full time. So I did my CPA with M&P at the time. Call myself a recovering accountant now. Maybe it was a little too entrepreneurial to stay in public practice. And since that time, I grew up with 1,500 to 3,500 acres and cow-calf pairs and a feedlot. And I wasn't a cow guy, so we focused all on grain. And my brother and my parents have a cattle farm too. We'll plant, somewhere around 40,000 acres this year, a sandwich, one side or the other, depending on how things go. We got a consulting company, Maverick Ag in Saskatoon, that Evan is a partner in and operates. And we're kind of working through naming. I guess we got us kind of a family office business where I'm not a big fan of extra cash in the farm. I think it kind of creates a bad decision. So we tend to strip any cash out and invest it mainly in companies we're trying to learn more about for agriculture and to make the farm better, but also just in operating companies that need some board work and leadership work.
I guess I'll give mine 20 years off and on as an accountant, I guess, or recovering accountant, as we like to say. Grew up on family farm, central Saskatchewan, did it pretty much through university, much like you, went back, did accounting and farming full time until 2010 when I took a hiatus from MNP and went back. Lasted till 2014, and then obviously had a few family things come up. 2 boys with autism, so made the choice to go back to public accounting. And in 2019, as I expected to get my partnership papers, I also had a friend of mine, aka you, throw a little wrench into my plans. So So here we are 5 years later, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people ask me lots of times. How have we grown the way we've grown? And I think I'd like to say I have a real big HR plan, but I don't really. I just try to find really good people and take them. That's kind of my HR plan, and then and they do most of the work on figuring out how we're going to get to where some of my dreams are.
Well, selling that to my wife and my parents was a little bit interesting in 2019, but we'll say it's been a success since then.
Yeah.
So let's go into farm and business updates. What is Kristjan Hebert doing right now as we get into April and you start to see some of the snow move?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple weeks of April are always pretty busy. I mean, between I get a kid that plays spring hockey, a daughter that gets into horses, a wife that wants lots of yard stuff done before I go into seeding hiatus, and a business that wants a bunch of my time getting stuff ready. I'm to the point now that most of my stuff getting ready is on the business side and procurement side, and the team gets the equipment ready. But do lots of meetings with the team because obviously I'm not a big fan of walking and buy stuff that isn't ready and kind of have an April 15th deadline that everything's got to be pointed at the road, that if I want to start seeding that day, we can. So, I'm trying to step back a little bit in the getting ready part, but do a lot of walk by delegation and talking to Jeff and crew of what we want to have ready. And yeah, this year's a little bit unique. We're kind of expanded 25% from last year and didn't start that expansion till about December 22nd. So that kind of filled any spare time that I had in January, February, and March, just dealing with all the chess pieces to pull that off.
So most farms, a quarter or two would be a big expansion to have to deal with. How have you dealt with it, or what are the ways that you're dealing with a 25% expansion in 1 year?
Yeah, and I mean, each deal's a little bit different. So I think it's 72 quarters in total. The first 8 or 9 we kind of knew about. It's with an investor that we've rented from for a long time. To be honest, he runs a combine for us, so that one was easy. The surprising one was just before Christmas. Had a neighbor with 50 quarters come over. We ended up buying half and renting half, and so I mean, it always takes a week or two to kind of walk through the deal and get close to getting that done, and then obviously that's almost the easy part, getting aligned on that. The hard part then is getting banks and lawyers to work at the speed I want them to. Kind of when, in my mind, I already know the answers they're going to come to, but they have to make all those answers show up on paper and work for credit departments and land titles, etc. So that always takes a lot longer than I want, and it holds up the process for the next steps, right? So, kind of. Yeah, that was deal number 2, and then deal number 3 had a neighbor come over that we rent some from already, and asked us to rent the rest. To be honest, my flat out answer was no. I don't really want to, but at the same time, it was 2 really big fields, like 2,000-acre fields. Can't really say no. And at that point in time, you just kind of tell the banks what you're doing versus ask. And not saying they always like it, but we did add a bank to our roster. Normally, we do use 2 of everything. In every supplier. Banks, we didn't really use too much of 2, but in this case, it worked pretty well to port over a mortgage and work with a new bank on one of the purchases. So that's been an interesting process just to see how they work and kind of follow our own rule of always have a backup plan.
Well, and the part I love about that is, I mean, don't get me wrong, growing up on the farm, taking on that kind of expansion, you'd be thinking the answer would be find people, find machinery, find all that. And none of that came in your answer. And I don't know the reason why, obviously, but a lot of it comes back to the business strategy, obviously, that we preach quite a bit of strategy and being ready for stuff like this. And obviously in downturns, the opportunities tend to get a little more present. So I think that's the big takeaway for me was this year, 25%, 10,000 acres didn't scare anybody on the team. In fact, our team probably wanted it just as much, if not more than you did. So it came as a bit of a surprise that the manpower wasn't scared of the extra work. And at the same time, they knew that we didn't need much equipment and this would be a good option for the farm outside of just growing to grow acres, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it in hockey teams all the time, right? I mean, our crew's addicted to the game, which is in our case growth, whether that be in acres or in value add or an investment, and they find all that part interesting. So you're right. I think if the deal hadn't went through, they'd have been more disappointed than me. And all it mattered to us is I talked about the part I had to take care of, but that's because we have, I would have said we had 2 really good lines on the team already. And the team job was to go out and add a third line. And the reason I say that is the majority of our team's kind of between 35 and 45, and we need to start adding people between the ages of 20 and 35. And really that's no different than sports teams, right? And start to mentor them and manage and move them along. And equipment wise, we were able to stretch pretty hard, and then we're able to work a couple deals out with some of the guys that were taken over to keep some equipment and do a little bit of custom work and to make all the numbers work. But yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's taken me a while to get there, but it's practice what I preach, right? I get the deals done and take the parts of the deals I have to do, banking and lawyers and procurement, and all the pro formas and financial work went over to you, and all the HR part went to Jeff, and then it flows down through the system, and I get the report every Monday morning when we do our L10 meeting and decide whether we're on track or off track. And if things are going well, I try to stay out of the way as much as I can.
So not that I want you to speak for Jeff, but how does he do it? I mean, how do you find a 20 to 30-year-old to come back to agriculture right now? Because, I mean, I do a lot of coaching right now, and the number one issue in agriculture in their minds is obviously weather comes up, but that to me is a manageable risk. To them, it's HR. So how do you get the 20 to 30-year-olds? Because right now, the majority of the workforce in ag, I think, is the 40 to 50-year-old retiring or retired farmers that are just running equipment. How do you bring them back?
I think there's some pretty obvious stuff, and then there's some less obvious stuff. So, I mean, I think some pretty obvious stuff is farms can't pay $20 an hour anymore. And I'm not saying everybody does, but there's too many that do. And so that gets to be a perception, right? So have a real compensation schedule. And I mean, as you know, Evan, we have different bands and where you get paid in each band and how you can work your way through them and how your performance bonus works and profit bonuses for some people. And, so we're pretty transparent on that. I think the other thing too is growth is really, and it's hard to say this because I mean, it was kind of my dream and my dad even thought I was crazy, but I said growth would help our people problem, which sounds backwards. But when we were smaller acres, everybody was stepping on each other's fingers. You could only have so many good people. Nobody really got to do what they were really good at the majority of the time. And as we've grown, Jeff manages people most of the time. You do financial stuff most of the time. Travis does mechanical stuff most of the time. Josh is working on the tech, Chad's running crews, Dustin's working on projects. And so 80% of the time, our best people are doing what they're really good at. And it's the same in the office with Ryan Lauren. And I think that's what the majority of the world wants. They want to do, stuff they enjoy and they're good at 70 to 80% of the time. And then that other 20 to 30 is trying new stuff where everybody understands there's some stuff you don't like. And then, the other parts are some stuff that maybe aren't as obvious, right? Like pension and benefits. And we do pay overtime at time and a quarter, but that's double-ended, right? One, I want to make sure you and Jeff are managing people and not burning out the best ones because it's always easy to bring back your favorites, right? But on the other side, I want spouses to see bank accounts go way up in seeding and harvest and understand that's what pays for half tons in Hawaii and spring hockey and cheer and whatever else, right? And then lastly, I think we've really been pushing on the crew to say, hey, you guys are addicted to the game and you love the growth, but you got to start bringing people in, right? And telling the story when you're out in public, whether that's at a hockey game or a curling game. And I mean, that's where our last person came from. Jeff was at a big curling bonspiel, and this kid's dad started talking to him. Hey, you guys looking for more people? My son worked on a farm for 2 or 3 years. He's gone pipeline and he wants to come back to the area. Absolutely, we want him, right? And so it's to have that story that you're always looking for good people. And even if you don't need another person, if we get a good person, we're going to hire him, even if we don't need him.
Okay, let's pull you off HR. I'm throwing softballs. Let's pull you back in. So 2023, give me a wrap up. What if you could describe it in one sentence? What are you going to remember about 23?
Roller coaster, right? So I mean, I think the highs and the lows were to do with pricing, and I think the spins were to do with lots of moisture on the south part of the farm and no moisture on the north part of the farm. But I mean, we had a $3.5 million variance in net income based on the crop pricing, right? And I mean, and we're normally pretty aggressive priced, and we were 40, 50% sold at harvest time, but we still farm enough land and have enough inventory now that the price drop from September to January was pretty painful. But then at the same time, I think some days it feels lucky, but other days, I mean, it showed that our risk management planning and working capital planning were done correctly and paid off and have taken us back to a position we're super comfortable with. So like I said, it's it's a bit of a roller coaster and one you don't want to always deal with all the time. But at the same time, you look back and say that the processes were in place to ensure that everything would come out kind of the way we thought it would come out.
And that's hilarious because honestly, roller coaster was what I had written right beside volatility. And the big part for me was obviously not only dealing with HGV, but dealing with all the consulting clients we have. That's what it was. It was drought to grew a crop to $19 canola to $13 canola, all within, let's call it, a span of 8 months. And if we had stress and mental health on the farm before, I think last year definitely would have highlighted it quite a bit. So yeah, to me that was 23. 23 was just, you didn't know what was coming next.
Well, I think the other thing I would say was we had enough stuff going on in 23 with expansions and people that, I was pretty thankful for the depth of our team, because once harvest got done, I was able to be pretty focused in the office and dealing with some stuff that we needed to get moved through, especially when these expansions started coming. Where if I'd have been typical farmer busy, we'd have probably said no to a couple of these expansions for sure. And so that part, it's always, I think when you're so focused on moving forward and addicted to the game, you forget sometimes to look back and realize the parts that they went the way that you expected, but that was still pretty damn good. And that part, 23 still kind of felt that way.
All right, 24. What's top of your mind? What are we going into here?
Well, I'd like wheat prices to go up if I wanted to give the same answer as everybody else. But I mean, you know, exciting parts, our labor power machinery obviously cratered because we didn't buy much, and other than a 150 horsepower tractor and a rock picker to take on 72 quarters. So that part was good because our fixed costs were down. Interest rates are up, slightly when it comes to our interest costs, but that was because of the uniqueness of porting over part of a mortgage and having a bunch of our old debt, locked in for, I'd say we got another 7 or 8 years on it. And with canola where it is and kind of where my marketing gut feel says canola is going, I'm pretty optimistic about 2024. And I also think that if there isn't volatility, you don't get many opportunities. And so we can't be mad about volatility if we don't want to see opportunities, because if everything was easy every year, we'd still be 3,500 acres like we were in 08, 09, right? So, you got to capitalize on everybody else's risk management tolerance and use that as a point of focus for what we're strong at and what we're able to do. And, at the same time, there's a couple things, we need to work on. We've seen that going to 4 drills and going to 6 or 7 combines is different than what we were. So getting the next level of managers kind of up to managing versus just being really good at their role is something we're focusing on pretty hard. And I think each time we expand, I have to step back from being around the field as much as I maybe like to be. And that's always a little different.
So what's the hardest part? Logistics, putting guys in drills, like what on a 10,000 acre expansion, obviously you got a lot of new acres, new dirt work to do, new things that you haven't seen before. So where's the focus this year? If I was going to ask Jeff, or I was going to ask you, what's the main priority for the team and for what we're doing for this year going into seeding in, let's call it 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's always a little bit difficult when you expand kind of between Christmas and seeding, because a lot of the stuff, the people that you're taking over their land have already gone down their process. They've already done their soil samples. They maybe purchased some stuff. And so it's that fine line between perfection and logistics. I mean, we want to do things our way, but at the same time, we need to incorporate some of their soil samples, some of the products they've already bought, because they can't go back on it. And we want to honor that for them. And some of the rent deals they're part of. And so it's that hybrid year of managing what we call perfection, but then logistics of the new land, the deals they had made, and the collaborations we need to have to pull it all off and be successful. And it's just being really aware of that and communicating it with everybody on why things are slightly different than the way we normally do them, and that next year they'll be back completely to normal. And most times, as long as you're pretty transparent on that, the team's up for the challenge and they're excited about it.
Perfect. Let's go to the 30,000 foot. So I know both of us were at Strat Coach last week. Obviously, I took the commercial flight to Toronto and spent my time in the airports and got to see a Leafs game where you went virtual. But give me a couple of your highlights from Strat Coach, obviously, with the expansions and with all the decisions this spring. Did you have some clarity, or what'd you take out of it, I guess, last week?
A couple things I guess I took out of it is one, with everything we have going on, it still surprises me to this day that I've always read business books and kind of personal growth books. I mean, I was reading them when we were in university, and you'd roll your eyes if you'd read Tony Robbins or Stephen Covey, and focus on what you're good at and just be good at it, and growth and money will follow, and don't do something you don't like. And like I said, I remember thinking they were, to be honest, they're absolute bullshit. They're just sales, right? And now looking back, I mean, we haven't went looking for any of these expansions. They've all come to us. Now our door's always been open that we've wanted them, and a lot of our good people, same thing. Like we headhunt a few, but it always surprises me how many good people show up and just make a joke. Hey, man, it might be all right to come work for you guys. And so coach kind of made me go back and focus on that of, don't ever get too worked up about something that's not quite working out right. Just keep doing the right things every day, and it's kind of magical that if you keep rowing everything in the right direction, you will get to the end. And so I think that's one thing that maybe I do a fair bit of for the team is just focus on playing the game right, and the outcome will come. And sometimes team members, they want to know exactly what the play is this time, and I can't give it to them right then. But it still surprises me that that's one of our strengths. And as I said, because looking back when I read those books, I thought it was all kind of a crock.
Well, and the funny part that I'm noticing now is I realize I'm a decade behind you when it comes to strat coach, but when I look at it now, I'm starting to see where the things you took from it are, and I can see it in the team, and I can see it even in what you and I have done. Like for me, the big four last week, the first one I wrote down JOMO, which is just a play on FOMO, which was just the joy of missing out. Because honestly, I am a type A personality. I do everything, and I like doing everything. And that was probably the hardest thing when I left the firm and came here, is that your expectation was not for me to do everything. So it's been different, and the whole joy of missing out theory behind it, I'm finally starting to see it, and I'd never seen it before. And honestly, it just kind of reiterated that we're on the right path when it came to that. The other one I took was simplification before growth. And I mean, you and I have seen in past lives and past jobs what growth does to companies that aren't ready for it. And I think the big one for me was, and I think we felt it the last couple of years a little bit, because we did have quite a jump on the consulting and even the expansion side on the farm and the farmer coach stuff. For me, it was, we just need to get back to basics and simplify things and just get ready for the next growth. Because like you used to tell me, opportunities would keep coming, and I believed just, let's call it 20% of the time. And now it's saying no to opportunities. That's the hardest part. And honestly, the simplification thing hit me big. Was it's not hard if you can just break it down and put it with the right people, right seats, and everything like that. It definitely has made growth a little easier to handle, where I think in a past life, I'd have just sat here for an extra 10 hours a week and tried to do it myself, and that wouldn't have worked.
Well, I think you go down your JOMO term, right? Is that you got to get good at saying no at opportunities that might even be great opportunities, but they just makes no sense for you or the business or the skill sets you guys have, or we have, right? So I mean, we've really focused that the farm is our engine, right? Like our consulting company and our farmer coach is great, but it's driven by the stuff we learn on the farm, and we need to do a better job of learning that. But the growth starts there, but then it spins off. So let's not take a big consulting job for the federal government that has nothing to do with something we're interested on the farm, even though we have the skill set to do it. It's just a time waster, and we're trying to we simplify our strategy so that we can multiply the value on every project we do, whether that's something on the farm that then we can run through consulting and farmer coach, or it's something honestly you learn at farmer coach that then gets implemented at consulting and at Hebert Grain Ventures, right? It's trying to multiply that up and down the value chain, and be really focused at what we're good at, and trying to build a network of people that we can tell others about that are good at other things, right? If you want an agronomy company or a legal team or an accounting team, we don't want to do that. We're gonna send you to people that we trust that work really good on that, and we're proud that they're really good at it, versus kind of being the shop of everything.
Yeah, more the stay in your lane, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the last part I took in this, we can sum this up with it. They literally had us write down, what are the top things we remember about the last decade, most personal and professional, and what are we expecting from the next decade? And I looked through my list on the last decade, and honestly, to be truthful, there wasn't a lot of personal items, and that struck me home. And I sent you a text after that, and I said, you know what, I gotta start working on personal side as hard as we've been working on professional the last few years, because obviously switching jobs and that, it pushed me into the professional side. But then I've come to realize I also have to worry about the personal side, which as an entrepreneur is a little bit of a balancing act at times. So it definitely cleared that up for me too, I think.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit more difficult for you, obviously, because of the situation. But I mean, you've watched me grow through that, right? When I started coach, we were buddies then, but I mean, I took 0 free days, right? And I was traveling, doing a bunch of the speaking that you're doing now, and now, I mean, you're pretty good about it. But our PR team shakes their head at some of the stuff I say no to now. But I'm just not willing to miss, like, my son's AA hockey game or a really important thing to my daughter. You can't pay me enough, and I went to Dubai to speak for a week, but I took my wife and kids with me. And could I work more if I didn't have them there? Absolutely. But could I have the experiences that we had if I didn't take them there? No, not a chance. And so it's finding that way of how do you carve out those free days to hopefully kind of rejuvenate yourself? And then how do you hybrid work life sometimes too and make them work together? I'd like to tell you it's easy, but that would be an absolute bold-faced lie.
All right. Last part I wanted to hit before we do a conclusion is I wanted to hit some social headlines because obviously I know you've deleted a lot of social off your phone lately, but I get my most inspiration from it, whether good or bad. So most of my blogs are either written because I'm pissed off about something that I read or I think there's got to be a change. So I'm going to share a few things here with us. And I think number one that's coming down.
I'm sure I do.
You can see that?
Oh, yeah.
I love the headline. Give me your opinion on, first of all, the first 2 words pretty much sum it up for me, but I'll let you comment first.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that Manette is a mega farm, right? The definition of mega, if you want to use a term, that's fine. But I mean, I know the guy not bad. It's still a family farm. He's got lots of pods. I guess I'll go back. I can't even remember. I think you were there. I was speaking in Saskatoon, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I got asked a question about this. What do you think about big farms? And the person that asked me the question was Matt. They came into my area, and whether you believe in pods or not, I mean, in our area, I got people that think we're a big farm. They're wrecking rural communities, and they're not good for it. And so I asked him. I said, "Well, that's fine, but I want to ask you a question first. Do you not like the mega farm, or do you not like the fact that you didn't go talk to that neighbor and bought him first before that farm got a chance to?" Because a lot of times when I get down to the part of it is, fear of missing out and regret are causing the emotion, the anger. And then it's easy to blame it on somebody. And that's in agriculture, but that's in life, right? I watch it in kids' sports, right? They want to blame the coach when really they should just have a chat with their kid about what's going on. You see it in school, right? My kid failed a test. It's the teacher's fault. They didn't study enough. Well, maybe you should have done some homework with your kid. And it's a real issue in our society right now. So that would be question number one. Are you mad at Manette? Or are you mad that you didn't go first? Or that the neighbor didn't know that you were interested in selling? Yeah. Secondly, I mean, it bothers me a bit that it seems like this is a little targeted, right? Like whether I agree with it or not, I haven't been to the area. I don't know what the land looks like. I mean, we push bush. People in the Peace River push bush. Everybody in Western Canada has had to push bush in the past 500 years. That's how crop farming started. So I don't really have an opinion on whether it's the right or wrong thing to do. I haven't been in the area. And I wish I had a crystal ball, because somebody tell us in 5 or 10 years what the gross margin is on that land, and then we'll know whether or not he was right. And he could be 100% right, and he could be 100% wrong. But at the same time, he owns the land, and he's writing the check. I know what people in town would think if someone started really dictating what they are and are not allowed to do with their yard to this level. So yeah, you know what? I support people that are progressive and successful, and I think it's awesome. And it excites me, some of the stuff that Manette Farms tackles. Personally, do I agree with everything they do? No, but I'm not running that farm. That's why our farm's different. And there would be things that if you asked Daryl Manette, is there everything Kristjan does that you agree with? He would say no. But at the same time, I respect what he's pulled off. I mean, he's 42 years old or something, right? And he's got kids that love him, and they're doing well in sports, and he's got a farm that he's proud of. As I said, I support people that are progressive and successful. And are they going to do everything right? Absolutely not. But in my mind, he's doing more right than wrong.
Yeah. See, and for me, I I took it as just another attack on a successful farm. So it like take the Manette name out of there. Take whatever you put, whatever name you want in there. It's agriculture and an agriculture newspaper to boot that's putting down the success of an operation that we should actually celebrate when it comes to actually, self-made millionaires creating agriculture, making it better, showing a bigger picture for a family farm. And I mean that's what I think's been lost in a lot of these. And I mean, you go back 6 months and read the John Deere article on him and Deere.
Yeah.
It's clickbait in my eyes, and what it's doing is it's just making it worse for farmers to try and be successful. Because I mean, we work with a lot of large scale farms, and not to this extent large, but large enough that I've had to tell them once you reach a certain set of acres, the community is going to turn their back on you a little bit. Just be prepared. And it's sad that we have to say that is where I take this article and where I take this stuff is that we should be celebrating the progressive of agriculture, because we're still years behind other industries when it comes to, the way that we're operating in the business sense and the mergers and acquisitions. And this is just the cusp, because I mean, we both have had conversations on land and where we see agriculture continuing. Like if we're mad at this now, give it another decade. Because I mean, you're going to be real mad then, because this is the way the industry is going. I mean, the stats are there. It's hard to argue against it, whether you agree or disagree. I mean, that's fine. Draw your line in the sand, but just be sure you don't stay on that line, because I think you're going to miss opportunities if that's the hill you want to die on.
I mean, I think it's a fundamental kind of Canadian thing. I've been part of a couple of businesses that have done a lot of work in the U.S. And I mean, in the U.S., they celebrate entrepreneurs. Like, Craig, somebody goes bankrupt and they're crowdfunding for them to start their next business, right? In Canada, I always joke that the reason Tim Horton's so successful here is we needed a coffee shop to go have coffee about who we hope to fail next, right? And it's that feeling. I mean, how many times when we were accountants did you hear the story about the local hardware store? The guy couldn't drive a new truck because that meant he was charging too much for hardware. And I think it's a bit of a Canadian thing, right? That humbleness doesn't lead to being excited about other people's success. I don't care if it's the farmer or the hardware store or the bank. But I mean, I think in agriculture, we need to open our eyes. I mean, everybody we deal with is way bigger than us. The companies we buy our inputs from, the grain companies we sell to, the government that we have to deal with when it comes to crop insurance and policy, the equipment dealers we buy from. And to be honest, it's a win for them that we're smaller and segregated, because they can cause a whole bunch of pissed off farmers by getting us fighting internally. So, I think to be honest, it's a little bit good for the industry that there are getting to be some big ones out there that have some clout with these companies and can cause them, I don't want to use the word pain, but can give them a wake up call, to say, hey, this isn't right. The customer journey you're giving us, and that some of the stuff you're doing just isn't right. And so I mean, I'm never going to be against consolidation. It's hard to say whether it's right or wrong. My kids will probably tell me, or my grandkids. But if someone's doing it and they're excited about it and they're having fun and successful, all the more power to them.
All right, Kanza. So I want you to give a little background on this for the people that are reading this stuff for the first time. Plus, I love the fact you're wearing the same flippin' hat in that picture as you're wearing now, in every interview I've seen since then. So give me the background on the Kanza and where you're standing on carbon right now, because obviously it's front and center, being April 1st and our beautiful April Fool's joke of carbon taxes going up. So how do you see it, and why did you get involved with Kanza, I guess would be the first start.
Yeah, so Kanza is the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agri-Food, kind of started by Nutrien, Loblaws, McCain, Maple Leaf, and Royal Bank. Funny way, I did a podcast for John Stackhouse, who I have a lot of respect for, works in the office of the CEO of RBC, former editor-in-chief of Globe and Mail. As I said, get along really good with John, did a podcast with him, kind of led to, hey, you want to come to Toronto to meet these companies and a few others that are working on this. And I've been traveling a fair bit, throughout North America and a little bit globally. And, this was 2-3 years ago, sustainability and ESG was really getting to be part of shareholder reports. The SEC was demanding it. It was coming up in Brussels all the time. So then, we started to see some of the carbon stuff in Canada, and it's a little tougher when you're an export country, but to make it real simple, and the Global Institute of Food Security report showed this, I believe Canada produces basically the most sustainable commodities in the world. And so I see it as an opportunity that if this is what the world wants, carbon, and we sequester it and grow it more sustainable than anybody, I'll sell them carbon. I'll sell them canola. I'll sell them wheat. I'll sell them malt barley. And if they want to buy carbon, I'll sell that too. Do I believe in all the emission reduction targets and the carbon tax? And no, I really don't. I think a version of cap and trade globally probably works because that's a private market. And if that's what shareholders want, I think the world can live with very, very, very large emitters having to buy insets or offsets from people like farmers. But right now we have no way to prove it, right? Because one, farm data is not good. And two, we don't have a great MRV system on the actual sequestering of carbon. We can show emission reductions. But at the same time, part of the reason I'm involved is I also don't want someone that is, call it way left leaning, that just thinks everything in farming should absolutely change and we should be 100% organic across the globe, should be the one that's part of the Kansas project, because I don't think it would take it in the right direction. So there's a lot of things that I can have an opinion on, but I don't have time for. And this one was big enough in dealing with the CEOs of some big companies that are going to have a lot of money behind this and have a lot of discussions with the federal government that I don't believe in agriculture we're getting right now, that I was like, it's important enough that I should put some time in here and have these discussions. And I do. I think it can be an opportunity for farms, but we also got to be real careful that federal policy doesn't go in the wrong direction.
Well, and we've said it before, is the one thing that could bankrupt the operation is its policy. It's not weather. I mean, you can mitigate 98% of the risks you have on a farm just through management and strategy. Policy is something that you don't have much clout in unless you're willing to take those steps, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this lots, right? I 100%. It's the biggest risk. I mean, I had a minister once told me they moved from justice to agriculture when they were minister of justice in one of the provinces. They had like 4 groups that were, lobbying or strategizing with them. And then they moved to agriculture. They were over 120, and that was in a province. I think federally we're over 400. And same thing. I've said this before. There's parts of what grower groups do that I think is really important, trade missions and money on R&D. But I think our voice is pretty fractured at a federal level, and it makes it easy for the feds to just say, you guys are all telling us something different. And so they just don't do anything. And so I think it's important that we have some of these life science and food companies and mining companies on the side of agriculture. And I've talked about this a fair bit. I think it's almost a natural resource sector strategy, right? We need oil and fertilizer to grow food and to grow grain and to sell it. And they need us as customers. And we probably need to get on the same page and learn some of the stuff that the energy and mining industry have already went through and mistakes they've made, and not make them in agriculture. And if we can be kind of the solution for them, then let's be the solution, and let's be proud of all our natural resources. And I think that can create some synergies.
How do you get 37,000 farms to agree with you?
37,000, eh? Why'd you pick that number?
Saskatchewan.
Oh, well,
I could go 187,000.
I was say, you're really making me go down tangents here. So, I mean, you've heard my tangent that federally we say there's 186,000 farms, et cetera. 16,000 of them have revenue over $1 million. Most businesses, net income is somewhere between 10 and 20% of revenue. So let's use 20. That's $200,000. You still got to pay yourself and pay debt out of there in most cases on farm statements. So it's a job. So really, we have somewhere around 16,000 farms, and we have 170,000 part-time farms or hobbies. And I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to be negative about that. If you want a part-time farm or you want a hobby, that's no problem, right? But $10,000 gross gets you dedicated to be a farm. And so, yeah, I don't need 37,000 to agree with me. I need a big chunk of 16,000 to agree with me, because that 16,000 is probably producing about 80+% of Canadian agriculture GDP. And of that 16,000, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm guessing 2,500 is 60% or more.
Yeah. Stats I had, I think we're 2.7 control 54% of the acres in Canada. So
2.7% of 186. Yeah, I wasn't too far off.
Yeah. All right, we're approaching 40 minutes, so I don't want to keep you all day, and I don't want the listeners to get tired either. So give me a short version of what you see from this and the podcast side going forward, and where you'd like us to take it, I guess. I mean, you're part of this. Give me the explanation of where do you want to see us go?
Well, I mean, for me, the exciting part would be every time every time an episode goes live, that people are super comfortable to send in a list of questions
Yeah.
that they would like us to give our opinion on. I don't want to call it answers, because people that have come to Farmer Coach or have heard me speak before, our way will not work for everybody. What I want you to, we talk about solving puzzles. Take a couple pieces from us and go solve your own puzzle, right? So we'll give you some solutions to the questions you send, but then, what are the hot topics that you just want to hear opinions on? And that would be my exciting part, is if there was enough engagement that every time an episode went live, 10 more topics, 5 questions and 5 hot topics came up, and we tackled that, whether that's the next week or 2 weeks or the next month. And then, really fun. I think, let's say we're 85 years old and sitting on a front porch and having a cold beer, and we listen back to the podcast and find out how horribly wrong or kind of right we were. That, if I had to kind of give the two goalposts, that'd be them.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you there. I want the interaction part is what I want out of this is I do want questions and I do want comments. And I mean, you're not going to agree with every opinion we have. I mean, that's why we're doing it, to tell you the truth, because I can write a blog and I can get hate, I can get love, it's all over the place. So I'm expecting that with this as well, just a little more real time and a little more lively. But the big thing for me is I want the questions. I want to know what you guys want to know, and take it as Kristjan said. These are just opinions. So they might work for you, they might not. It's kind of determined on your definition of success, of which way you want to take it. So I guess that's all I got. So thank you for joining us on The Truth About Ag, episode 1, and hopefully just one of many. So thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.